Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of the Heartfelt Conversations podcast. I'm Vikas Dua, the HR in my heart guy. And as always, I have another very interesting guest to join us this evening. I started this very recently to try and bring forth, conversations around careers because as I operate in the environment as an HR professional, one thing is very clear that there's a lot of flux in the environment and there's a lot of shift happening. A lot of professionals, irrespective of their background, irrespective of where they stand in the corporate hierarchy, are getting impacted. And I know for a fact that they're looking for help because I get a lot of inbound messages as well on this platform requesting for assistance. Now, unfortunately, there's not much I can do individually. I can't help each and everyone get an opportunity or a job of their choice. But yes, what I can do is help spread awareness, help spread information about what's out there and what are the steps they should be taking to future guard themselves. And in that direction is where I really started Heartfelt Conversations. And today I have yet another wonderful guest, a very established individual, someone who's got solid credentials, someone who's really passionate about what he's doing. And you see his photo there on the screen, but I want to bring him up right now live for you because I don't think I want to keep him backstage for much longer. Welcome to the show, Arjun.
Hey Vikas, thanks for having me.
Great. So I know we've been planning this for a while, right? And just to let the audience know, you invited me for your audio event a few months ago. I think it was late 2023 in December, and I had a wonderful conversation with you at that point. Now, this is not a quid pro quo. That's not the reason you're here. The reason is very clear. That limited time we spent made me realize that you're doing some great work for the community, and I think in a lot of ways, navigating transitions successfully is something that is the need of the hour. Because, like I shared in the opening, there's a challenge in the environment. People are getting impacted. We really need to figure out where we move from here. And to that extent, I think, Arjun, you're the right person. I just want to let the audience know what they are in for today. I want to introduce you
Mhm.
because I'm sure while you have a great profile, there is something they may not be aware of. And the fact is that you're not only a B economics from New York University and having worked in that environment, you're also a LinkedIn top voice when it comes to sharing insights on the future of work and common career dilemmas. You've worked across some of the top brands in the environment in the world, companies like Mercer, where you headed the executive rewards and corporate governance piece. Uh, Arjun has also, been a consultant where he's driven programs and helped companies like McDonald's, Xerox, PepsiCo, the best of the best, transform their people practices. And today, as a founder of Pivot, he's launched a platform for mid-career professionals to achieve ambitious career goals. It includes a combination of mentorship, I believe, structured roadmaps, and personalized matching in courses, communities, and jobs. So, Arjun, I'm really excited to know more about this from you. And I think the right thing to do then is to really start off by, asking you to share your journey and what is really Pivot is all about. How big is it today? So, let's kick it.
Sure. Perfect. Great. Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Vikas. Really appreciate that. And thanks again for having me on the show. So, I think in terms of my journey, it's been actually, I would say, a very diverse, broad amalgamation of, very different environments that I've been in, I would say. So I'm originally from Meerut and born and raised there. I did my high schooling from Gurgaon. And this was when Gurgaon was actually a gaon, not the hustling, bustling, developed city that it is today. And then I immediately left India after my high school, went to US for my undergrad, where I went to New York University and studied economics there. And right
Okay.
after graduation, this was right around the post-financial crisis time period. Most of my friends and I myself were really panicking in terms of landing a job. We had spent a fair amount of our parents' fortune on this, very expensive undergraduate education, which most people don't have the privilege of. Some of our parents had taken loans, so we were quite motivated to get the job, but the opportunities were few and far between, similar to the environment you're seeing today in terms of job market. Somehow, uh, by luck and a little bit of hard work, I was able to land a very good role in management consulting in 2011. And the role that I landed, I actually didn't really know much about that field, that industry. I knew about management consulting, and that was one of the main reasons I applied to that role. But it was consulting primarily in talent management, HR practices, and executive rewards and performance improvement role. So
Okay.
that specific niche is something that I wasn't much aware of until I started working in that industry. And I think what I learned after landing that role from people within that industry and at my firm was that it was a very serendipitous journey for most people. They either had different backgrounds, so they had worked in strategic consulting and then ended up moving to HR and talent management consulting. Some of them had careers in finance and basically very diverse careers. And so a lot of the people there had very diverse experiences. It wasn't just that they had specialized in that field or even had dreamt of becoming an HR consultant ever. So that kind of gave me an early exposure of how people come from diverse backgrounds. When they're working in any field, it doesn't mean they have specialized in that one field. But long story short, I worked there for about 7 8 years. And then I decided to move back to India in 2018 just because of personal reasons. I mostly wanted to be closer to my family. I had spent, I think, over half my life away from them. So I just thought it would be nice to spend some time with them before I settled down. And I moved back to India. I joined Mercer at that time. And that was a very different experience because my prior organization was just less than 100 people, and Mercer was tens of thousands of employees, largest HR consulting firm in the world.
Right.
And gave me again exposure in a new environment. India was a very different environment of working compared to US. Um, but similar things, I came across a lot of people from different backgrounds, not just in terms of industry environment, but socio-economic environment as well. Um, that again led me to believe that there is not one path to get to a certain role. People can get to the same outcome using different paths. And I think it just ignited this idea in my head, that job changes started becoming popular around the mid 90s when people started, I think, post liberalization in India. People started to move out of companies and land new types of roles. But the equivalent of that for this decade was going to be career transitions, meaning people not just changing companies but changing their domain or industry or those kind of things. And I saw a lot of people within my own network making these kind of drastic transitions which were transformative for their career, and realized that the journeys were very haphazard usually, and they didn't really
Sure.
have a single solution to utilize and implement their transition. And that's kind of the genesis for Pivot, which is what I do today. I started Pivot in 2021. It's been about 3 years since we've been doing it. And obviously I'll be sharing more throughout this conversation, but basically in one sentence, what we do at Pivot is help people make smooth and successful career transitions, right? And that's been the journey so far.
Wow, wow. Very interesting. A lot of insights there. Thanks for sharing. And just made me wonder because when you think of the word pivot, traditional mindset is to think of a pivot as something completely off track in a different direction. And just to take one example, possibly a banker maybe ditching everything to become a musician, but I'm sure that's not as simple as that, right? Maybe there are
Mhm.
more dimensions of pivot. So for the benefit of the audience, would you be able to kind of give us a broad view of what all constitutes a pivot, or how many different kinds of pivots are something that professionals are experiencing today?
Sure. We actually did a sort of in-depth study on this in terms of understanding how many different types of pivots there are. I think I don't want to get too theoretical or academic here, but what we
Okay.
realized was that there are about 7 or 8 types of different career pivots that can be there. And I think the degree of the pivot can also vary significantly, right? Like what you
Hmm.
described in terms of the banker becoming a musician, that's one of the most drastic pivots that one can imagine. But you can have smaller pivots as well, right? Like I think, for example, what we consider a pivot is any time you have an inflection point in your career, meaning it's not just a linear journey where you're just doing what is expected of you in the next role, but you're making some element change within your career trajectory, which could be either your domain. So, like for example, going from HR to, let's say, marketing, right?
Sure.
Or industry change. Let's say you are staying within HR, but you're going from ed tech to, let's say, fintech or something like that, right? Then you also have organizational level change, which doesn't always mean you are just getting promoted, but let's say going from individual contributor to a managerial role or a leadership level role. There are very fundamental level changes in the nature of your role and expectations when these kind of promotions happen. Then you have geographic transitions also, like let's say somebody moving from India to US, and doing the same role but in a very different environment. So you need to grasp the regional dynamics when you're making those transitions. And then the last one, which I would say is a major one, and we should talk about maybe, is when people are moving from, let's say, a typical 9 to 5 corporate career to starting something of their own, whether it's a entrepreneurial journey, or it's a freelance journey, or some independent contractor journey, or anything along those lines. So yeah, these are broadly the various types of pivots that we indulge in.
Cool.
Yeah.
And just to kind of clarify one of the scenarios in my mind, when, let's say, and this happens typically for a lot of corporate professionals, when they move up from, let's say, a regional responsibility to a pan India, pan geography kind of responsibility, would that
Mhm.
constitute a pivot in your view?
I think it could potentially, it depends. A lot of times, like when I said that regional transition happens, it could happen in that way, the way you just described, meaning like I am mostly currently focused on, let's say, my city. Like, for example, Zomato.
Hmm.
Zomato has a lot of city, business heads, in the sense of zonal managers, right? And they focus a lot on their particular city, and if they are successful, they get promoted to manage broader regions, which could be the state, which could be a national level role as well. And I think when that happens, there are a lot of learnings, a lot of transferable
Okay.
skills that you can definitely bring from your prior role. But what got you here won't always get you there, as they say. So you definitely need to think about things in a different light, because there might be broader challenges that you haven't experienced before, which you need to upskill for. And in that sense, yes, it could qualify as a pivot. But I try not to make these things too rigid and put
Sure.
labels and boxes around them. I
Yeah.
think pivot is anything where you are experiencing an ambitious career move, and it's not the same trajectory as you were experiencing before, and you need some support, some guidance, whether it's through us or just in your own network even. That's a pivot for us.
Beautifully expressed, and I think that just made me kind of on a lighter note think about the fact that this evening our new government is also getting sworn in, and there I do see a pivot happening in some sense in line with what you just shared. So
Exactly.
while we won't get into the politics, and that's not really the focus for the show, I couldn't help sharing that.
Yeah, definitely. No, I feel like there are so many. It's funny. I think the current elections, I've seen people sharing so many anecdotes from what's happening and applying it to different things. For example, I actually came across this video. I won't spend a lot of time, but it's a YouTube video by Think School, and they do very deep dives on, just general trends in the market. And they talked about the marketing engine behind BJP, and how, people who had nothing to do with politics, they basically were, I would say lawyers, students, kind of doing their own thing back in, I think, 50s, 60s, just started a very small group and decided that they were going to take a stand against the reigning party of the time, which was Congress, and took them 35, 40 years to get to where they are in mid 90s, basically. But it showed like how small, consistent steps over a period of time can result in some such mammoth outcomes. And that's one of the things that I feel like I often talk about when I talk about pivots, making small, consistent efforts. So I think learning can happen from anywhere. So I'm glad you brought up the politics stuff as well.
Cool. Superb. I just want to, in fact, remind our viewers that they can drop in their questions also for you in the chat. I'm sure you'll be happy to take some of those. I do have my own, you can say, bucket of questions lined up for you as always, because I'm eager to know much more about pivots. As I shared in the opening, and I can't overemphasize this enough, I think the next 3 or 4 years or 5 years are going to see a lot of environmental changes. I want to just request, guide, motivate all my community members to be watchful of the signals, be prepared, and to make these moves more strategically. And in line with that, Arjun, my next question, therefore, by design, is really to understand from your experience, how do you see the Indian professional population behaving? If you were to, you know, divide them in percentage terms, how many are pivoting proactively, and how many are pivoting because they're being forced to pivot?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think because, to be very honest, I don't want to give us false sense of precision and just say that X% are doing this and Y% are doing that, because honestly, that data is not really available at a granular level today.
Yeah,
Unless you do a very, I mean, we have a workforce of 500 million people, right? That's 50 crore people. Obviously, if you remove all the blue collar and sort of the agricultural jobs which constitute the majority, there are still 100 million odd white collar workers out there. And
yeah,
so it's hard to kind of predict very broad level trends without diving deep into government sponsored data. But what I can tell is that, based on certain studies that have been done at a global level, there is about 16 to 17% of the global workforce, meaning in total, the size of India's workforce, if we compare it to the global workforce, is going to transition or make a pivot by the end of the decade. Which, so if you think about it in numerical terms, about 500 million people are going to have to change
wow,
their domains, because it's going to be a requirement. Their roles are not going to exist in the same way that they do today. And this is on a denominator of about 3 to 3.5 billion people. So again, that's about 15% or so. And this is based on a McKinsey study of a future of work that came out about, I think, in 2022. And what happened, actually, COVID accelerated a lot of those trends, right? Because COVID accelerated technological advancement, and we are seeing the role of AI
yeah.
today. Kind of the insane impact it's having on pretty much every stream that you can think of. So initially, the prediction was closer to, I think, 450 million, 500 million people. Now, I think it's closer to even 700, 750 million people. Um, that's just the necessity that people will be required to pivot. But I think if you now cover a broader bucket of people, where you take into account people who are not just doing it because of the requirement, but because they proactively want to think about the next phase of their career, and want to make something of a transformational move, I would say that number at least doubles, if not more, right? So what we are predicting, what I often talk about with our community, is it's closer to about half of the workforce, right? So about 1.7 billion people out of 3.5 billion people would probably make some sort of a transition by the end of the decade.
Those are staggering numbers indeed, staggering numbers. And to some
Hmm.
extent, I feel validated, because while I might have expressed that fear in a sort of generic uh, English statement, you've
Hmm.
added data to it, which also always, in my view, makes it much more impactful and much more relevant for everyone. So thanks for tabling that. In fact, you partially answered Vipul's question there, that how do you prepare for a pivot, especially in the age of AI, as roles are evolving at pace. Now, Vipul is a regular watcher of the show, and I've noticed that he's really, really passionate about his work and career, and he's always very focused in terms of knowing more of the future in terms of how we can improve. So, I'd request you to take this question up. I'll probably, piggyback my question on it as well. And the question is really that, where do you start when you want to pivot? I mean, do you watch out for signals? Do you kind of take some baby steps? What is the sort of broad roadmap as per you?
Sure. I think, I mean, the first thing is to understand why behind your pivot, right? Why are you making that pivot? Because I don't think there's a one size fits all, right? There is a lot of different reasons why people make a career change, or even, if you're not changing your domain or industry, like we discussed, it could just be moving on from IC to a managerial role or leadership level role. So I think it depends on what kind of a transition you're making.
Hmm.
And based on that, you should think about what your next steps are. But let's say, in in an average pivot or an average career transition, I think there are certain overlapping elements which can be broadly utilized to make your transition more effective and successful. Um, the first thing which we espouse for, and I feel like this is the number one thing that people don't do but they should, is have some structure, some method to the madness when you are making a career pivot. Because today what most people do is very ad hoc and scattered in nature, right? And that's just because it's not people's fault. See, people are already in their full-time jobs, they have personal commitments, there's so much happening in their lives, they don't have time to invent a new playbook to say, oh, let me just now come up with a whole new structure of how to pivot.
Yeah.
It's like, even if you look at a simple job search, what do people do today? They basically refresh their resume, they start applying to jobs randomly with a single click on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Yeah.
And today, unfortunately, that strategy doesn't work, so they apply to hundreds of jobs, they don't hear back, and then they go back to square one, thinking, oh, what am I doing wrong? Let me now network, let me see if I can connect with people on LinkedIn, get some referrals. That also doesn't work. So anyways, it's a very long-winded way of saying that people don't have a very well structured, organized approach today, just because there is nothing in the market today that exists to help them with that, right? But the reason, one of the primary reasons we built Pivot is to provide that playbook to people which they can utilize to a large extent as is. So let's take an analogy, right? Now, let's say I want to become a digital marketer, right, which is a very popular career today. I either would go to some sort of a undergraduate college for it, or do some sort of a course certification in it, and that course certification would provide me the modules I should be focusing on to be able
Yeah.
to upskill in that particular field, right? And if you look at any course, any education curriculum, there it's very well structured, right? I mean, we can debate about the efficacy of that structure, but there is a structure in place. It's not just up to you to say, oh, I'm going to today learn about SEO, and the next day I'm going to learn about, let's say, content marketing, and third day I'm going to do something else. No, it's a very well thought out journey. So similarly, when you're making a career transition, there are certain building blocks that you have to focus on. According to us, there are 5 core building blocks. I, without taking too much time, will just briefly touch upon them. So the first building block is clarity, understanding why you're making this transition, how you relate your internal goals, which can be, let's say, your new interests, your skill set, your priorities, with the future outcomes you're trying to achieve, right? Second building block is understanding your skill set. What are your superpowers and what are
Yeah.
your gap areas? Both, not just one. Understanding what you're good at helps you build confidence towards how to communicate to your community and to prospective employers what value you bring to the table. Because if you don't know that yourself, how can you communicate it to others, right? Simultaneously, if there are any gaps, which there are frequently when you are changing your stream, understanding what are the critical requirements from employer standpoint or client standpoint, and bridging those gaps. The third building block is all around networking, meaning uh, not just remaining within your comfort zone or in your siloed zone to just single mindedly apply. I think that strategy doesn't really always work today, because the market is bombarded with very well qualified people, right? So you're competing with those who have a lot of more experience than you. And when that happens, if you just apply on portals, you're not going to have a very successful transition. You need to find champions around you who will champion your cause, for why you are the best person to be hired for a certain role. So for that, networking is important. Then fourth thing is about profile building, like your resume,
Mm.
your LinkedIn profile, your personal brand, your work portfolio. All of these things send signals, and they are sort of the make or break of your transition once you start applying to jobs. So I would say they differ for people who are pivoting versus people who are just changing jobs in the same exact profile. So we can maybe touch upon that later. And then the final step is your actual job search strategy, or kind of, if you're launching something of your own, then how do you actually launch that thing, create the buzz for that particular business you're launching. So that is the final piece of this process. So these are the 5 building blocks that we have come across as the most high ROI areas for somebody who's transitioning. Yeah.
Awesome, and really interesting to see the framework that you made, Arjun. Because again, I'm sure that lean somewhere back to your management consulting days. We all know in the professional world that whatever becomes a process gets done and gets done accurately. So I'm really thrilled to hear about that, and I'm sure Vipul, you can take away some of that learning and guidance. We also have more questions coming in the chat, and I just want to let our audience know that we are following a little different approach this time. So, Gopal, there is no career pivots hashtag this evening, but yes, the best question will be in a copy of my book, and that best question will be selected by none other than our guest Arjun. So, keep those questions coming in. I have one question, Arjun, that I do want to pose to you, and that's something that I think also will become more relevant in the next decade. The question really is that at what stage does one really start of thinking of pivoting? Because one is also that the older you are, the more senior you are, pivoting may become or possibly will be more challenging. Is that the thought you concur with?
Yes and no. See, if you look at past trends, you might be conditioned into believing that yes, it's very hard to make a transition the more senior you are. But I like to say in investment terms, past performance is not reflective of future trends always, right? So what I feel is that it's not necessary that what we have seen in the past will apply in the future here as well, and that's what we are starting to see some early signs of as well, because at Pivot itself, we are seeing about 30 to 35% of people who come to us have over, I would say, 12, 13 years of experience, right? Which means they are not at a junior or even I would say very mid level. They are mid to senior level folks, right? Typically senior manager, director, VP, etc. And again, if you don't kind of pigeonhole the definition of what a pivot is, they are looking for
Sure.
some sort of a transformational move, right?
Mhm.
Could be the domain or industry change, could be a regional change, could be going to a leadership level. The the reason it has been difficult in the past is because the more you climb the career ladder, the fewer the opportunities are, right? For example, if you look at a typical organizational structure, it's a pyramid shape, right? And you have less people at the top. There is one CXO, then you have a few more CXOs at the business leadership level, and then you have more managers, then you have more individual contributors and so forth. So just because of that, the nature of the pyramid at an organizational level structure, there are fewer opportunities, and so people have a smaller probability of landing their target role at a senior level, right? So most people end up staying within the organization at a more senior level, and I feel like that was working because up till now, organizations themselves did not create a lot of transformational change within their businesses, within their leadership ranks, and they wanted more stability. But if you look at how fast technology is evolving today, and the kind of skill requirements that are evolving today very, very rapidly, that is necessitating change at almost every level. So today, if I am, let's say, an FMCG organization, a traditional one, like let's say Haldiram or Dabur or something like that, which has been in the market for eons, I am not necessarily just selling offline. I'm also starting to sell online, right? I am having private equity players who are necessitating very transformational moves within the business, and asking me to hire a chief data officer or chief AI officer today, right, at the senior
Right.
leadership level. So when these kind of things start to happen more and more, what we believe is that the folks who have, let's say, 10 plus 15 plus years of experience are also going to start making more transformational moves in their career, which is a trend that has not been particularly seen in the past very frequently, but it's getting traction more and more so in the near future.
Superb. And I don't know whether you've got some spy cams floating around or drones in this part of the town, but it was quite ironical that my lunch today was at Haldiram's with the family. So I don't know why.
We're watching you because
Big Brother's watching.
yeah,
But
exactly.
great insights. And, I really like the way you structure and you offer precise inputs, which I'm sure our audience will really benefit from. I have another question which I want to present to you. This is from Alaknanda, and thank you, Alaknanda, firstly for joining us. Pleasure to see you here. The question is how to pivot when you have already put in 10 to 12 years in one domain. For example, an HR manager wanting to get into data analytics.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question and one we get pretty frequently. I think, firstly, I want to talk about the mindset around this, right? Because I've been talking a lot about the practical steps that one should take, and that is ultimately very important when you are when the rubber hits the road and you're actually trying to navigate the transition. We'll talk more about that, but I have not really spoken about the philosophy around transitions or the softer aspects of transition. I think they may be softer, but they can really impact the success of the transition. So a lot of times people, when they have spent 10 years or 12 years in a domain, they feel like they have spent so much time and effort that it would be a waste of time and effort to kind of go to something new, which is not going to utilize what they have worked on. And typically I find two issues with that thinking, right? Number one, you're the sum total of all your experiences at any given point in time. So even if you're transitioning, it doesn't mean you're leaving behind everything that you have worked upon, right? Even if you have been in HR and you're going to data analysis, you may have mastered the art of stakeholder management, working with diverse groups of people, understanding what their personal requirements are when they are trying to maximize their own potential, and utilize that insight into your next role in data analytics. For example, if you want to become a people analytics person, that is something that you can very well utilize your HR background and experience in, right? Even if you're, let's say, doing traditional data analytics from a let's say business strategy standpoint, so you're studying customer behavior and those kind of things. Once you have come across, let's say you've done your data visualization, you've performed your analysis, and now you're presenting results to different business leaders, the time that you have spent as an HR manager would help you understand how do business managers make their decisions, and utilize that insight when you are communicating your findings through your data analytics, right? So that is one thing to think about, that you're the sum total of all your experiences. You're not going to start from zero. You're going to build on top of whatever you have achieved so far, right? And the other thing is that, there is this theory around, loss aversion. So loss aversion is all about that, we as humans hate losing twice as much as we like to win, right?
Yeah.
And what that means is, by nature, we are risk averse people, right? So we want to take less risks. And so that is so deeply conditioned in us that anytime we see, potential loss, in the sense like, we are going to start over, we are going to lose everything that we have built so far, it just sets us back and makes us question things more than we really should. Because what we have seen throughout our lives and throughout human history is that the world moves forward when people take risks, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for example, if Microsoft had not spent billions and billions of dollars into OpenAI, we probably wouldn't have had ChatGPT today. And that was an absolute risk. ChatGPT may not have ever worked even after spending tens of billions of dollars in it. But they took that risk and it worked out after 7 8 years. So obviously not everybody has the time and resources to take very bold risks, but I think people should start questioning whether loss aversion should apply to them, or is it just one of those heuristics biases that we have because of our social conditioning. So I think these are the two things I would talk about in terms of the mindset. And then practical level terms, one of the most important things which I would say people should think about when they're transitioning after 10 to 12 years is making sure that you are you're utilizing your transferable skills, right? In some ways, what you have learned within your HR role, you're applying that in the next phase of your career. And so what that means is, even if you want to get out of HR completely, don't do that right away. Take two smaller, or make two smaller pivots as opposed to one large pivot. It's a more de-risked way of taking a big risk, right? That can be very, very helpful, especially in an environment like today where there are fewer opportunities than candidates looking for roles.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I hope, Alaknanda, that answers your question. I'm sure it does. And I really like that statement you made, Arjun, that we are a sum total of all our parts. And those experiences we've gone through, the journey we've traversed, I'm sure it ends up adding to us at a holistic level. Some of them experiences may be good, some may be poor, but they make us who we are. And I strongly agree with that statement you made. So thanks for reminding us of the same. I really also
Absolutely.
want to ask you, in line with the same question that Alaknanda has posed. Often we also struggle with understanding that a pivot may need us to kind of walk a few steps back, maybe perhaps, especially when it comes to, let's say, compensation, title, and so on. Is that something that happens in a lot of cases? That's something that our professionals today are understanding and are okay to, proceed with? What is the change you're seeing or the observation of the environment, if I might ask you that?
Yeah, that's a good question. One that comes up pretty frequently about the compensation and all of that. And see, let's again take examples, right? Because I could give you theory around this and people would debate it till the cows come home. But I think what we have seen is in some cases, you can't avoid it, right? For example, if you have been in already a well paid role, right, which a lot of times people are today. um, I won't take obviously specific organizations name, but there are a lot of organizations with a large brand which are making mass layoffs today, right? And people have been compensated extremely well in the, in those organizations even right before the layoff. So it's hard for them to find roles, even if they are not pivoting to a new career, even in the same role, they are having a hard time finding somebody or some organization that compensates them at the same level. So they've had to take a pay cut. Even in pivoting, same thing happens a lot of times. If I am, let's say, somebody who's an expert at my domain, like for example, I'm a software engineer and I want to become a product manager, right? There is a potential that you will have to take a pay cut in the beginning. Usually, those pay cuts can vary anywhere between, small chunk change like 5% to maybe something like, 20, 25, 30% at most. That's the broad range that we have seen. But, I think this is not the full story. This is the part of the story. So if you just focus on this part, you will feel that yes, I'm being shortchanged. I will be getting a pay cut. It doesn't make sense to pivot. But a pivot is not a short-term decision. A pivot is a long-term decision, right? In most cases, you're not pivoting because you just want to try something out for half a year and then move on to the next thing. Most people are serious about their careers, and when they're making these kind of pivotal decisions, they are thinking about at least the next 5 years, if not the next 10, 15, 20 years. And so, what that means is when you're thinking about your wealth accumulation, your compensation opportunity, you need to keep that time frame in mind as well. Right. So, if I look at just 1 year or 2 years or 3 years worth of pay, I might feel, okay, I'm not going to be able to, uh, make the same amount as I'm making in my current role. But then when you start doing a longer term analysis, you start to figure out that over a period of time, not only do you break even, but you actually end up making more in your new role. A lot of times, not in every scenario, but a lot of times. And most people who are driven mostly by monetary rewards when they're making a pivot will want to do this analysis. A lot of times, people are not making a pivot just because of monetary reasons. So for them, even if in the, let's say, 5 to 10 years, they are not making more than what they would currently, it doesn't really matter because they are doing it for a different reason and it enriches them, not in financial terms, but in a personal fulfillment terms, right? So yeah, I mean, you should look at the monetary aspect over a long term, and then you should also look at the non-monetary aspect of a transition and what that gives you from a personal fulfillment standpoint.
Super guidance, super guidance. Honestly, I think Alaknanda's question has sort of inspired neurons all across the environment. I was
Mm.
also motivated to expand on the question. And now we've got Vipul, who also wants a little additional clarity or dimension in line with Alaknanda's question. And his is how to manage the early fear of the transition once the pivot has been done.
Um, yeah, you mean like you've made the pivot, and I think now we are in the new role, and we are kind of feeling, let's say, that imposter syndrome that people often talk about
Possibly.
today. Yeah, that's a very good question. I think there are multiple ways, right? And I think this would be a good time to bring up one of the key things that we do it pivot, and I encourage whether people partner with us or not on the transition, is don't do it alone. Don't make these bold moves alone, right?
Wow.
People think about, so that there is some sort of, people romanticize solo struggle. If you look at some of these movies that kind of showcase how this one individual kind of locked himself up in the room, like 12th fail, right? I mean, it's a brilliant journey. I love that movie, and there are many such examples of people just working on their own. But usually, any transformative career journey will have others helping you, right? Even in 12th fail, the guy locks himself in the room, but you see that there are a lot of people who are enabling that for him. Like the person who runs that tuition center, I'm forgetting the name, but there's so many examples where, people end up romanticizing, or for maybe they are embarrassed to share with others that they are making such a bold move, and they might fail later, so they have that fear of failure. They don't want to share it. But the best thing you can do to ease your fears is to share things with people at least you trust around you. And in that regard, you can share it with many people. It could be your, obviously, family, if you feel they provide a safe space for you to share your biggest fears and challenges and can support you. It could be a broader community of people, like people on LinkedIn. I mean, that's what I essentially did. If you look at my own journey, I come from a consulting background, and today I'm building a tech startup platform, which is something that I have very limited background in, at least from an engineering standpoint. One of the things I did was just connect with people who have been through these kind of transitions. So they essentially served as my mentors during that journey. Um, and I know today, suddenly, because of certain other platforms as well, mentorship has become very common. And at least if you're on LinkedIn, you would see people talking about mentoring on different platforms. And one of the things I just want to say is that when you are choosing the people, make sure you are choosing the right people, because sometimes if you choose the wrong people, it can backfire also. And who are the wrong people? I mean, there's only one kind of wrong people. The one kind of wrong people which I don't think are a good fit for career transition support is people who are in it for themselves, not for you, right? Mentorship is not about the mentor. Mentorship is about the mentee. So if people are talking about themselves as a mentor, I personally find something not very comfortable with that. You know, I think you should be talking about the results you have driven for the mentees, not how many sessions you have had or the ratings you have gotten and those kind of things. So that's just a very high level I want to share. So stay away from people who are just doing it for themselves. Try to find people who invest in you, who actually are doing it because they want to see you succeed, and you can have a couple of conversations to kind of get that get that energy, get that sense check whether they are in it for them or they are in it for you. So yeah, I think these are some of the things, Vikas, that I would share on that front.
Lovely, lovely. I think Vipul, that would have answered your question. I think Arjun did a fabulous job of elaborating on how one can address the fear factor and that imposter syndrome, which rightly attacks all of us at some point in our careers, and especially so when you're moving or taking such drastic and high value steps in your career, they are more than likely to come up that situation. So, thanks, Arjun, for clarifying that. We also have a question from Stefan, who wants to know, and if you're comfortable sharing, any success story from one of your mentees from the pivot journey who's successfully navigated a career change, without names
Yeah.
possibly.
Sorry.
I'm sure you wouldn't want to possibly take names, but whatever you're
No.
comfortable sharing.
No, I don't think so. I mean, you can go to our website and see a lot of people who have talked
Oh,
about their
lovely.
journeys, right? That's definitely there, but it won't be my place to kind of, just talk about them in first person. I think there's so many people. We have worked with close to 5,000 people so far who have made transitions through us. And I would say some of the more interesting ones that we have seen, like for example, there's one person who came early when we first started Pivot in 2021, and this person was from a very specific engineering background. He was working in metallurgical engineering at a
Wow.
shipping company, logistics shipping company, one of the largest ones in the world. And he wanted to make a transition to one of the most unrelated fields that I had thought of at that point, which was investment banking, right? And it was a complete drastic transition, similar to what you were talking about, a banker going to become a musician or something like that, right? So if you look at the surface level, you might feel like there is absolutely no linkage between the two careers, right? And that's what we initially felt too, and it's felt like it's going to be a very uphill battle. We won't be able to land that role. It took us about, I think, 3 to 4 months, somewhere between that period, to actually help him land a role. And how did we do it? I think there were multiple things. I've shared the framework. So we essentially applied that framework. But one of the main things that I remember from that journey that really worked well was that this person, even though he didn't have much background in investment banking or finance, and he did take some courses to upskill himself in that regard, the main thing that really helped was leveraging what he already knew about the shipping industry, actually. So what we ended up doing was targeting investment banking firms which had a lot of clients in the logistics and transportation industry. So they were doing a lot of M&A, they were doing a lot of business deals within that specific industry. And so this person's his experience within the shipping industry was something that initially we would have thought, oh, we should try to hide and only talk about the course that he has taken in investment banking and kind of reposition the entire profile. But we went against that narrative that we need to hide what we have done. And similar to what I was saying earlier, we are the sum total of all our experiences, and that really kind of proved true here, because whatever experience he had in logistics, the network he had built in the network in the logistics industry, all of that was extremely advantageous for certain, not every investment banking firm, but a lot of boutique investment banking firms within India who were focused on the transportation, supply chain, and logistics industry. So that's one that I really remember well. Another one which I want to talk about is a person who had spent about more than 2 decades in corporate career as a sales leader, and he had been working within, I believe, the L&D and edtech industry before he decided that he wanted to do something on his own. He didn't want to kind of have that rigid corporate framework around him anymore, and he wanted more flexibility, more autonomy around how he led his career. And I think you were asking us because people facing a lot of challenges, especially after 15 plus years, 20 plus years. And so this is one of the things that we are seeing, a major trend, that people after that amount of experience don't always want to continue working within a corporate environment. They want more flexibility. So this person wanted to become a trainer, a sales trainer, a career coach for young individuals, and that is something that we helped him do. For him particularly, what I remember, and he's even left a testimonial, very nice testimonial for us, is the number one thing that was very helpful is to connect with people who had done exactly that. They had themselves made that kind of a transition. And so when you connect with those who have been there, done that, it's not just about the quote unquote mentorship part. It's really kind of living that experience before you even have that experience through the eyes and ears of somebody else, right? So you learn from others' mistakes, you learn from their wins, and that is something that was very, very helpful for this particular individual into becoming a trainer. And he has a thriving business today. From what I mean, I've been connecting with him every now and then. He's been doing it for about 2 years now, I believe, and very, very happy with the move. So yeah, these are some of the examples.
Superb. And I think very, very interesting because clearly when you were sharing the example, one thing which stood out for me, even as an HR professional, is the fact that most of the time what I see candidates do is identify top five known brand names in any industry that they're willing or wanting to target, and spray and pray and shoot out their CV and just
Mhm.
hope that they get a call and they get selected after the interview. Clearly, in a pivoting scenario, what was evident with what you shared was the fact that you really need to map yourself, your background, your skills, your experience to specialized organizations or companies or roles or jobs where that could actually help you be positioned as a sort of unique individual, a special individual who possibly would be of a higher value rather than just someone who's got a generic qualification in that same space. So lovely insight there. I think even as an HR professional, I think that really opened up my eyes.
Yeah.
And most of the time we also hear, as I'm sure you're aware, Arjun, that customize your CV for every job that you apply for.
Hmm.
And while I'm not completely against that, I also think somewhere it's also about hiding what you've really done, or at times, or whitewashing some of your own experience, which again is something that I don't think you are a big fan of. So
Right.
I'm glad that in some sense that wavelength matches.
Yeah, I think, ultimately you have to think about yourself. I mean, this might sound crude, but you have to think about yourself as a product that you're selling to a
Yeah,
buyer in the market, right? So I think that's where the advice around customization comes. But when you are the product, you don't falsify around what the product offers, right? You
I
don't,
know.
I mean, yes, I mean, we are going through this whole label padega India movement right now, which has taken India by storm. And the whole notion is that don't mislead people, for sure, right? That's
Yeah,
kind of what it is. And in the same way, never mislead people when they are evaluating your candidacy for jobs, because one way or the other they will read the back of the label of the product and read the label, right? So in the same way, even if you have hidden things on your resume, they will interview you and they will find out whether or not you have that experience. So customization doesn't mean hiding or fabricating. I think customization means that you are able to mold your experience and communicate it in a way which resonates with the recruiter or the hiring manager most, right? And
well,
that customization can be very helpful, but it's different from the kind of customization that sometimes people end up doing, which is either hiding or fabricating.
true. Very well said. True.
Yeah.
And to take the conversation forward, we just have few more minutes. I think lovely to see the participation from our dear audience. I have another question from a very dear friend, and again a podcast hoster in his own right. Gopal wants to know the story of your career pivot and what led to the birth of pivot.
Good to see you here, Gopal. Gopal is a dear friend, and I'm sure Vikas, you have connected with him as well. Glad to see you here, Gopal. Thanks for the question. I have a very simple story here, to be very honest. So in 2018, while I was still in US, one of my very dear friends, who is now my wife, she was going through a career transition herself. So she used to work at TED Talks, if people know about TED Talks. She was a program manager there, and she had always been wanting to work in TV, media, entertainment as a writer. That was her dream job. And she had been thinking about doing that on the side for quite some time, but because of the pressures of her daily job, it was very hard to implement that switch on the side, at least for her. There might be a lot of people who say, why don't you work on the weekends and just get things done, in a way where whether there's potential in this new role. And she tried that, but it wasn't really working out. So she made a very bold move of giving up her cushy career at TED Talks and just transitioning to this new field on her own. Um, and I saw that journey up front, right? I was there, looking at how she was creating massive spreadsheets of people she was going to connect with, get coffee with, to learn from them about the new industry she was targeting. And the courses she was trying to take, figuring out what course is the best one, where I'll get my bang for the buck, and changing her resume, changing her LinkedIn profile, preparing for interviews. And, it took her almost about a year and a half to 2 years to really start making dent in that field. And now she's actually a TV producer at one of the largest networks in US, TV networks in US. And even though if you look at her journey, you might say, okay, that worked well, she did it on her own and she figured it out. But it took her a year and a half, and there was so many challenges along the way, so many doubts, and moments of lack of clarity, where she wasn't sure whether it was going to work out, that I felt like this is not the way it should be, right? There has to be a better way than this. And I started talking to just people within my network when I started seeing that journey. And I realized that there were so many people who had either thought about a career transition but gave up on the idea because they found it so daunting, right? or people who had actually tried it and had a very similar horrendous experience while implementing their transition, that I knew that it was a problem that I wanted to work on. Right, I knew that it's not just a big problem in terms of the, the breadth of the problem. So breadth is like how many people experience that problem. I had done my research, I had looked at the McKinsey study, and I had been working in HR where we would always talk about how organizations are very rapidly requiring new skills from people. They're hiring for new roles and those kind of things. So I knew at a macro level that the breadth of the problem was large, but the first hand experience of seeing my wife and other people within my network go through that journey showed me the depth of the problem, that it was a very painful problem for a lot of people, and both of those things really resonated. So I decided to start Pivot. That's the story.
Amazing. So, lovely note to kind of almost end this session on, because family is, a pillar which is always with us through our ups and downs. I've always
Mhm.
believed that. And in your case, especially, family and that to your spouse has sort of inspired you to pivot and really create something very, very wonderful and valuable for the larger community. I think going forward, it's very clear. I saw my dad work for decades at the same organization. I've been part of the generation which has worked for 5, 6 years in one, and the future that way I see it is the passion economy, right, Arjun, where people are reinventing themselves all the while, discovering their likes, wanting to
Mhm.
be in the right place, which gives them fulfillment, not just the salary check at the end of the month. And to that extent, I think pivots will become more and more key to this objective that future generations are kind of trying to drive for themselves. So I'm so glad that I could bring you onto the stage today and get to hear your thoughts with so much clarity. I think those comments in the audience are already showing that and confirming that to me. So it's a job well done this Sunday, the way I see it. Thank you so much for being part of my talk show today. I
Oh,
want you to
absolutely,
also
my
select
pleasure.
our winner for the best book and a few ending words as well before you do that. Yeah,
Wait, sorry, just repeat that last part. I think I was talking over you.
sorry. So let's select the winner of the HR My Heart book. The best question, as per you. You went through a few today. I don't know if you want me to put them up as a reminder quickly.
Sure.
And
No, I'm looking at the chat section. I
okay,
feel like definitely Gopal had some great questions, but I don't know if Gopal has been a frequent visitor and has already won your book. If not, I would love to have Gopal as the
he's already
winner.
been gifted the book, being someone I've known for a while now. So
Okay, got it. Let's see. Let's see. I think there were some really good questions. I believe Alaknanda had a really good question with regard to, if you have been in a career already for 10 to 12 years, and, how do you transition into a new domain after that? So I think that's a very good question. I would select her.
superb. So congratulations, Alaknanda, and you've been selected by our very own Arjun. I'll connect with you separately to get hold of your address and where I can dispatch that book to you. But thank you so much for joining us this evening. I hope besides the book, this session has been of great value to you. Arjun, any parting note thoughts from you before we close for today? Lovely session for me to actually end my Sunday evening on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I had such a great time. Thank you so much for having me. And because I just want to end with this quote that I actually read from Michelle Obama, right? It was about her career transition. I'll just quickly say it. She transitioned from a public policy role to what we know her today as, kind of first lady of United States. And she said at one point that, there are times when our heart knows better than our head with regard to what we want to go for in our career and in our lives, right? And it's important to listen to your heart. Don't just always listen to your head, even though it might be a big career decision. And we are very conditioned to think from our heads only on our career front. I thought that was a beautiful thing, that sometimes our hearts know better than our head what we want, and we should take action on that. So, given that it's a heartfelt conversation, I thought it would be appropriate to end on that note.
Brilliant. I think that's been truly, truly lovely of you to do that. And at some point, if I'm looking for brand ambassadors, then you'll be the first one I'll call. Thank you so much, Arjun.
Absolutely. Thanks
And
again, Vikas, and thank you everybody for joining on this Sunday evening.
yes, thank you so much, dear audience. And we'll be back soon with yet another guest. Do stay tuned into my channel. And thank you, Arjun. Thank you from the heart.
All right, thanks everyone. Thanks, Vikas.